Welcome back, lads, ladies, and other False Nine Show listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today. Yank Lampard, as he's being called, has officially gotten the boot this morning, as confirmed by the Athletics, Adam Crofton and Phil Hay. Jesse Marsch is no longer the manager of Leeds United. He didn't quite make it one full year as he was appointed in late February of 2022. When he took over, Leeds were sat in 16th, and he managed to rally the troops to a mighty 17th placed finish. Rene Maric, Cameron Toshak, and Pierre Barriou have all also left the Leeds coaching staff. They are following in Jesse Marsch's footsteps. In this video, we're going to be talking a little bit about Marsch and his career, his potential future prospects. We're not going to go into too much details regarding Marsch, just kind of a little bit about more so his time at Leeds specifically, and how that has played out for him. And then we're going to talk about candidates to replace him, and we will be talking more about Jesse Marsch's career in another video that we are also working on. So stay tuned for that. If you're interested in something like that, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Without any further ado, let's get into it. So Marsch's career at Leeds has been stuttering at best. He only has 11 wins in 37 matches played and 4 wins this year, this campaign so far. So they've really been struggling up and down his career there. Currently sat 17th in the table, exactly where they finished last year. And the only reason that they are ahead of Everton right now is goal differential. Everton signing Sean Dyche is going to boost their chances of relegation survival. Wolves are all improving. Nottingham Forest is improving. Leicester is improving. West Ham will probably return back to mid-table sometime soon. It's looking really grim for Leeds right now. It's about Southampton and Bournemouth and Leeds, who are kind of comfortably the 3 worst teams in the league. And believe it or not, they were actually my 3 choices to get relegated this year. So we'll see how it ends up for them. I think plain and simple, Jesse Marsch is just not good enough to be a Premier League manager. I really like him. I think that he is a good manager, and he's the best American manager that we've ever produced, but he's just not good enough for the Premier League. He, of course, came through the Red Bull system where he was at Red Bull New York. He was working with Tyler Adams there, so that's a big factor on their positive relationship. And then he did, earn the promotion over to Red Bull Salzburg, where he won the Austrian Bundesliga, and gave a few impressive displays in the European campaigns. But in my opinion, that's more so down to the fact that Red Bull Salzburg it's a one-horse race in the Austrian Bundy, and there's a lot of talent coming through that academy, coming through that team. The likes of Sadio Mane have come through. The likes of Benjamin Sesko are currently there. And, of course, Erling Haaland was there for his first 6 months in charge, and I think that's a large reason why... And, of course, Erling Haaland was there for his first 6 months in charge, and I think that's a large reason why they were so good, or looked so good, in the Champions League under Jesse Marsch. That being said, he is the first American coach to win a league title in a European league, which should not be scoffed at. That's really, really impressive, and hugely important for the future of American coaches. He's a trailblazer, he's a trendsetter, and his legacy will be one of the biggest coaches, or the first major coach from America in the 21st century. I mean, there's a lot to be taken positive from his career so far, and he's still very young as a manager. He's only 49, so he has a lot of time ahead of him to continue to ply his trade and potentially maybe come back to the Premier League if he can continue to grow as a manager. I think where he's really limited are his tactical and technical capabilities. He has one system that he knows how to implement, and that is the Ralf Rangnick Gegenpress. I think the Gegenpress is a good transition, an easy transition from Bielsa ball, but it's not a particularly innovative tactic or particularly intelligent tactic. It doesn't really offer too much. But if you have the athletes, it can be a really functional tactic if it's not particularly innovative. It's just demanding. Where I do think he really shines is in his man management capabilities. He's well liked by every single player that he's ever worked with. He and Haaland still to this day maintain a positive relationship. Haaland said that the match that he was most looking forward to for Manchester City this year was his match against Leeds, was his match against Jesse Marsch, where he could play against his old manager. They have a good relationship, and this is a common theme across all of his stints at all of the different clubs that he's manages. He's well liked by his players, and he's good at motivating them and good at getting them to play for the shirt. That part of Jesse Marsch's game is undeniable. If reports are to be believed, he never lost the dressing room at Leeds. It was the fans, it was the board, the owners who lost faith and confidence in Jesse Marsch, not the players, not the playing staff, not the people actually in the dressing room. All that being said, though, I think tactically and technically, he's just really devoid of any particularly impressive know-how. He doesn't really know how to make adjustments in the game against more tactically or technically astute teams. He just doesn't have that ability to switch systems or to be flexible in any way, or he has no plan B whatsoever. And his teams aren't normally technically impressive either outside of individuals. That's not something that he's shown any experience managing or instilling or coaching into a player, making them better like that. So he is good at the man management side, but this lack of technical and tactical quality is a problem that has plagued American managers for the last 30 years since the inception of the MLS. It is something where America really falls behind every single other footballing nation, is that there just isn't a tactical approach to the game. There isn't a technical approach to the game. It's 4-3-3, all-out attacking, pressing football, and they think that makes them look good, but it isn't intelligent. It isn't done properly. There aren't systems in place that teach these players what to do when things go wrong or how to react in certain situations. There isn't this instillment or stress on developing technically from a young age. And that problem, that lack of technical and tactical quality, is going to continue to plague football in the USA from the grassroots level up to the international team, until we start prioritizing that, until we start taking lessons from our European and South American counterparts and actually instilling qualified candidates in leadership positions in American football programs. So we got an in-depth video on Jesse Marsch's future career prospects in the works, and we have a video on the different systemic issues that are plaguing American soccer and potential solutions for fixing those systemic issues as well. Those are all both in the works, so I don't want to focus too much more time on those topics. Instead, I want to take a few moments to do some fun stuff and look at potential candidates to replace Jesse Marsch as manager of Leeds United. So let's get all of the unrealistic options out the way first. Number one is going to be Marcelo Bielsa. Now, there's a lot of Leeds fans who are calling to bring Bielsa back and bring back Bielsa ball. I think that's very romantic, but it's just not going to happen, and I don't think that it should happen. Marcelo Bielsa has ran his course at Leeds. He got them promoted back into the Premier League, back into top flight football, which is where a club of this stature deserves to be, but he's not the right man to take them forward any further. He ended up losing the dressing room. He ended up losing the fans. The results were skidding out. The club was sinking, not even floating. The club was sinking, and they needed a new manager. They went with Jesse Marsch. Probably the wrong pick. Good for American football, but probably the wrong pick. And I don't think that a regression to Marcelo Bielsa is the right option. Number two is going to be Thomas Tuchel. Like I said, we're getting all the unrealistic picks out the way. Leeds fans would be absolutely overjoyed if they managed to secure Thomas Tuchel, but it's never going to happen. He has no interest in joining the club. He hasn't said anything like that. I just know that from everything he says in the press, Thomas Tuchel has zero interest in joining or working for a club as, small as Leeds. Number three is going to be Andre Villas-Boas. Now, this is where things start to get slightly more realistic. I think this is a risky option, but it could end up paying off. Villas-Boas is a manager who had tough stints at Chelsea and Tottenham. He kind of underperformed for both of those clubs, was particularly unimpressive. He does come from the Portuguese school of thought. He's a manager under Jose Mourinho's style of play. But since his time at Tottenham and at Chelsea, he spent a lot of time overseas, probably experimenting, rebuilding his reputation, rebuilding his brand, his own personal confidence. He was managing in places like China, and then in 2020, he came over and went back to link up at Olympique Marseille, where he did really good. He did really, really well at Marseille. Managed to get this club back into the Champions League for the first time in 6 years. Now, this is the biggest club in French history. They should be in the Champions League pretty much every year. And he managed to get them back into it. He managed to win the first match against PSG in 9 years. Somebody had an itch. He managed to win the first match against PSG in 9 years in Le Classique. So he did a really, really solid job of building foundations for Marseille, and he left the club by mutual choice. He and the club both said it was time to part ways, and they replaced him with Georges Sampaoli last summer. This is definitely a risky option, but I think that Leeds would be pretty pleased if they managed to bring in Villas-Boas. There's a lot worse options out there that they could do. Number 4, Rafa Benitez. Rafa is an interesting candidate for me. He's probably the most talented and qualified, experienced manager that Leeds could realistically attain. You know, Zidane, Tuchel, they're out of the question. But Rafa Benitez would probably be willing to come to Leeds if it really came down to it. I know that his time at Everton didn't really go too well, but it's Everton. They're a shit-run club. It's not really going well for anybody right now, except maybe Sean Dyche, but that's because that man is like made of stone. He like eats gravel for breakfast. He's just not human. He's like a little gremlin or a troll or an ogre, but like in a good way, you know? Yeah. Yeah, I think Rafa could do a really good job at Leeds. He offers a completely different style than what this squad is set up for, however, and that is a major drawback for him, is because he's a much more defensive manager. That's the kind of football that he likes to play, and I just don't think that Leeds don't really have a very good squad to begin with. Period, they don't have a very good squad. There's not much talent in there. There's certainly a lack of goals. I know they signed Rutte in the January window. We'll see if he can actually start converting, but I do think an area where they shine is in the midfield, where they have Mark Roca, Tyler Adams, and just recently added Weston McKennie. He's a Champions League level player right there, so that's an absolute coup of a signing for a club like Leeds, who are fighting off relegation right now. That's really, really big, really, really massive. So this midfield is certainly a really strong area of the park for them. I think that Rafa can work with a good midfield. They don't have necessarily the personnel at center back to be that particularly defensive style, but Christensen on the right-hand side of defense is good, as well as Junior Firpo on the left-hand side. They have good personnel in there. They have personnel, individual quality in this squad, and I think Rafa could do wonders with them. And I think that he could not only keep them up, but if they were to go down, Rafa is the perfect option to bring them back up on the first go-around. Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? Number 5, Andoni Areola. Now this is our hipsters pick. This is a manager that some of you may have heard of, some of you may not have. He is currently plying his trade at Rayo Vallecano in Spain in La Liga, where he is significantly overperforming with the La Liga minnows. Areola was a longtime fullback for Athletic Bilbao. You may or may not know, Athletic Bilbao are a Basque region Spanish football side, and they only sign players from the Basque region. It is a requirement for them that they only bring in and have players from the Basque region. Because of this, they have a lot of loyalty at the club. They're historically one of the biggest clubs in Spain. And Areola spent almost his entire career there. He had one campaign at the end of his career at New York City FC. He went there specifically to play under none other than Patrick Vieira. He went there because he wanted to learn from one of the legends of the game and develop his coaching badges, develop his coaching merits and skills. This worked out really well for him. He managed to garner almost 40 appearances for New York City FC under Patrick Vieira, and the club achieved a lot of success, winning a title. They were really good, and Areola himself grew quite a bit from this time under Patrick Vieira at New York City FC. He retired after only one season and then moved over to the Cypriot League, took a managerial position there, which didn't go particularly well, but he was able to get a position at CD Mirandes in the Spanish Segunda Division, where he did really, really well. He managed to lead them to a Final Four place in the Cup and overperformed more or less in La Liga 2. This earned him a promotion, this earned him a switch over to Rayo Vallecano, who were La Liga 2 rivals for CD Mirandes, and he immediately started performing at Rayo Vallecano. They were able to secure promotion in his first campaign as manager, and in his second campaign as manager, their first in La Liga in a few years, they managed to achieve a comfortable mid-table finish as well as another Final Four appearance another semifinals appearance in the Copa del Rey. So he's been very, very good for Rayo Vallecano so far. He is instituting high press, attacking, quality, technical, tactical football at a very, very good level. There are marquee wins, like a 1-0 win over Real Madrid earlier this year. They managed to beat Real Betis, Real Sociedad. In his time as Rayo Vallecano manager, they are looking absolutely excellent. There are interesting players coming out of there as well, so he might be able to bring in potentially like Raul de Tama. So he might be able to bring in someone potentially like Raul de Toma, or another forward, or a center back potentially to come in and bolster this Leeds squad in the summer if they do make this option. He's absolutely the hipster's pick and has been doing very, very well at Rayo Vallecano this year. They are currently sat in 8th place, only 2 points behind Villarreal and that really highly coveted Europa League 5th place finish. So it's questionable whether he would actually even be willing to leave the club at this time, but his experience at New York City should show that there isn't much of a language barrier, and if he is ambitious, if he is looking to make a step up, he could do a lot worse than Leeds, and Leeds would be absolutely lucky to bring in a manager of Areola's quality. Number 6, and what seems to be the most trendy popular choice in the online atmosphere, is Mauricio Pochettino. Now, Pochettino might even be too big for Leeds. He's of course coming off of his PSG career, and then before that he was at Tottenham, and before that he was at Southampton. So this Leeds project is honestly more akin to what Pochettino did at Southampton than it is Tottenham or it is PSG. So he might have outgrown a club like Leeds, but if he were willing to take on a project, a rebuild, or a younger, a more inexperienced side, Leeds would be that option for him, and Leeds could do really, really well for them as well. He would be absolutely fantastic. He is a very good tactician. He gets the team to play as a team. He moves up and down the pitch with all of his, 10 of his outfield players, all 10 of his outfield players moving together as one single unit up and down the pitch. They defend as a unit, they attack as a unit. And I think that that's something that would really, really benefit this Leeds side. He, of course, doesn't really have any silverware in his trophy cabinet, with the exception of one league title for PSG, but that's not where Leeds are at the moment. That's not what they're competing for at the moment, so they could do a lot worse than bringing in Mauricio Pochettino, and I think every single Leeds fan would be overjoyed if they manage to secure Mauricio Pochettino. And last but certainly not least is our personal pick for the new Leeds manager, Marcelo Gallardo. Now, to me, guys, this just feels written in the stars. He is one of the most staunch diehard Marcelo Bielsa fans out there. He, of course, played under the Argentine when Marcelo Bielsa was managing the Argentine national team, and has a famously good relationship with Marcelo Bielsa. He has backed the manager on several occasions, spoken out in defense of him when he's come under criticism, and has spoken out when Marcelo Bielsa was extended as manager of the Argentine national team in favor of this decision. Marcelo Gallardo, of course, is extremely qualified as manager. He is River Plate's single greatest manager of all time. He left the club in 2022 after 2 extended periods of success with River Plate. And he cited the reason for leaving being that he wanted to take a quick break from football and move on to a new challenge elsewhere. To me, taking over this Leeds side, which is arguably going into free fall, they're certainly struggling at best. I think this would be a huge challenge for him and something that he might relish in the opportunity to come in and fill his mentor's shoes, to come in and take on that burden, to shoulder that, to come in and fill his mentor's shoes, to fill that burden. I think he would really relish that opportunity. It depends on the interest that he is getting from other clubs around Europe. It doesn't seem like he's had too many bites from other clubs, looking from other big clubs, European Champions League, Europa League competitors. So I think that Leeds might be his best option. The Premier League is becoming the go-to choice for managers all across the world because there are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 teams competing for European spots right now. And Leeds, if they manage to find a way to break into that top half of the table, they're right up there in that hunt for that 7th place Europa Conference League spot. So I think Marcelo Gallardo would relish the opportunity to ply his trade at Leeds in the European game, figure it out a little bit, kind of have some training wheels on, while also having a little bit of pressure and getting the chance to fill Marcelo Bielsa's shoes. Alright everybody, thank you so much for joining us. It was a really fun video today. Massive bummer about Jesse Marsch for American football, but there's still a lot to be positive about. This was, I think, just a job that was too big for him, and his career is certainly far from over. He didn't necessarily give a bad showing of himself, and there were times where Leeds fans were absolutely overjoyed with Marsch, and a lot of people kind of started to think about American football differently because of the success that he has found and the good things that he instilled at this Leeds side. So there are positives to be garnered. I just think this club was a bit too big, this challenge was a bit too big for him, and that's okay. There's still a lot of positives to be taken from this experience. Thank you so much for joining, guys. Remember, if you liked, please hit that like button, please subscribe. It really helps the channel out, really helps us out in that algorithm, that famous YouTube algorithm. So please don't forget to do that. It's just one little click, not that hard. Aside from that, guys, thank you so much for joining, and I will see you at the next one.